A Williamsburg Independent editor used AI tools to write and voice this report. A new state law limits localities' ability to set minimum off-street parking requirements for housing built within half a mile of public transit facilities. In accordance with the state's mandate, Williamsburg is preparing to reduce parking requirements for new residential development near its downtown transit center on North Boundary Street. Under the new rules, single-family homes and duplexes will require just one parking space per unit instead of two. Apartments will need only half a space per unit, down from 1.25 to 1.5 spaces. The regulations also eliminate the visitor parking requirement of a quarter space per unit that previously applied to townhouses and multifamily developments. The new rule will affect much of downtown, but also land that has been discussed for development, including more than 150 acres owned by the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation near the Visitor Center and the new sports complex.
The Williamsburg City Council is continuing closed-door negotiations about the possible sale of city-owned economic development property. At Monday's work meeting, the council once again entered a closed session to discuss these negotiations, as permitted by state law. This marks the latest in a series of such discussions over the past month. The city has not disclosed which specific properties are under consideration. However, a review of city land records reveals that Williamsburg owns more than a dozen vacant commercial and residential properties, totaling over 50 acres with assessed values exceeding $7 million. Several of these parcels are already listed for sale, including properties along Capitol Landing Road and Richmond Road. Many of these sites were former motels that the city purchased and demolished years ago, and they've remained undeveloped ever since. The council's continued closed-door meetings suggest that negotiations with potential buyers are progressing, though details remain private for now.
Colonial Williamsburg is preparing to relocate a historic structure known as the Cowles Quarter to make way for a new visitor parking facility. This 18th-century building will move to a site beside Booker Tenement on Nicholson Street, selected because a similar structure once stood at that location. The Cowles Quarter is what's called a double quarter, which typically housed two enslaved families. Its distinctive features include two front doors, no interior connection between the units, and a shared central chimney. The structure was first documented in a 1928 photograph behind the Jeanette Cowles house on Duke of Gloucester Street. This will actually be the building's third relocation. It was moved in 1930 to the Raleigh Tavern site when Merchant Square was developed, then moved again in 1951 to a Franklin Street parking area. After the upcoming move, architectural historians plan detailed investigations, including tree ring analysis to determine its construction date and paint analysis to understand its original appearance. These findings will eventually guide a full restoration, though no timeline has been set.
The James City County, Chesapeake Bay, and Wetlands Board has approved 2 construction exception requests in environmentally sensitive areas. At their July 8th meeting, board members unanimously voted to allow new residential construction on Tadich Drive and a retaining wall replacement on John Wickham, both located within resource protection areas. The Tadich Drive project impacts around 1,200 square feet of protected buffer zones in an area originally platted back in 1970, before current preservation ordinances existed. After reviewing the application, staff determined the environmental impact would be minimal. For mitigation, the property owner must plant 3 canopy trees, 6 understory trees, and 9 shrubs to offset the impact. The John Wickham retaining wall replacement affects just 68 square feet of buffer and requires 6 shrubs as mitigation. Both approvals require financial guarantees to ensure the required plantings are completed.
Colonial Williamsburg is preparing to relocate a historic structure known as the Cowles Quarter to make way for a new visitor parking facility. This 18th-century building will move to a site beside Booker Tenement on Nicholson Street, selected because a similar structure once stood at that location. The Cowles Quarter is what's called a double quarter, which typically housed 2 enslaved families. Its distinctive features include 2 front doors, no interior connection between the units, and a shared central chimney. The structure was first documented in a 1928 photograph behind the Jeanette Cowles house on Duke of Gloucester Street. This will actually be the building's third relocation. It was moved in 1930 to the Raleigh Tavern site when Merchant Square was developed, then moved again in 1951 to a Franklin Street parking area. After the upcoming move, architectural historians plan detailed investigations, including tree ring analysis to determine its construction date and paint analysis to understand its original appearance. These findings will eventually guide a full restoration, though no timeline has been set. Developers have presented an $83 million live performance venue concept to regional leaders in Williamsburg. The proposal combines a 68,000 square foot indoor performance theater with a 90,000 square foot outdoor amphitheater, and both would sit next to the recently opened Greater Williamsburg Sports and Events Center. The project was pitched to the board of the Historic Triangle Recreational Facilities Authority as Phase 2 of the envisioned entertainment district. The indoor theater would seat 1,000 people, or 1,700 for general admission events, while the outdoor amphitheater could accommodate 1,100 seated guests, plus 3,900 on the lawn. Both venues would share back-of-house operations like loading docks and green rooms in order to keep costs down. The presentation was informational only, with no formal action taken. If approved, the project would need about 2 years for design and construction. Community members and local arts groups have been advocating for a dedicated performance venue in Williamsburg for decades, and supporters view this as a natural extension of the sports center's success. Detractors argue that market dynamics may not support the costs. Potential funding sources would still need to be determined. Williamsburg City Council has received an update on new state legislation that includes the potential for local cannabis taxes. The Virginia General Assembly's budget bill establishes a retail cannabis licensing framework that takes effect July 1, 2027. Under this new law, the Virginia Cannabis Control Authority will oversee licensing and operations. The law allows municipalities to impose a 3.5% local tax on retail cannabis sales and restrict public consumption. The law also preserves local control over zoning and business licenses. The annual legislative update from the City Attorney's Office covered several other topics, including minimum wage increases, affordable housing authority, and data center requirements. Additionally, a separate provision in the budget allows localities to ask voters to approve an additional 1% sales tax specifically for school construction, tied to bond terms of up to 20 years. Council will need to decide whether to pursue these local options.
James City County is considering whether to replace Sentara as the administrator of its employee health insurance plan, based on a recent request for proposal. The county is self-insured, meaning it pays medical claims directly rather than buying traditional insurance. But it currently contracts with Sentara Health Plans to manage coverage for potentially more than 1,100 employees and retirees. Now the county has opened the contract to competitive bidding, with proposals due in August. If a new administrator is chosen, the transition would take effect July 1, 2027. According to county documents, about 900 people are enrolled in medical coverage, with monthly premiums ranging from $746 for a single person with a high deductible plan to $2,609 for family coverage under the traditional option. The county covers most of that cost. The county notes that companies can bid on different parts of the plan, including medical, prescription drugs, and dental coverage. Overall, the county budgeted for a 9% increase in health insurance rates this fiscal year in their FY27 operating budget.
Homelessness in the Williamsburg area saw a slight decline over the past year, according to a new regional count. The 2026 point-in-time survey, which was conducted in January across the Virginia Peninsula, found 85 people experiencing homelessness in the greater Williamsburg area, down from 89 the year before. James City County accounted for the largest share, with 60 people counted, followed by York County with 15 and the city of Williamsburg with 10. Overall, the Virginia Peninsula region saw a 7% drop, with 425 people experiencing homelessness, compared to 456 in 2025. This decline came even as the region's shelter and housing bed supply fell 9%. The point-in-time count is a single-night snapshot taken each January. It includes people in shelters and those living in places not meant for habitation, like vehicles or encampments, but doesn't capture everyone facing housing instability. Thank you for listening to the Williamsburg Independent.